She can't sit here. The sentence came softly, almost politely, but it cut through the first-class cabin harder than the low hum of the engines beneath the floor. Nia Brooks looked up from the leather seat marked 2A, her boarding pass still resting across her knee. Outside the oval window, rain slid in silver lines over the glass, blurring the runway lights into long, trembling streaks. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of coffee, warm fabric, and the sharp citrus cleaner the crew had used before boarding. The man standing beside the aisle had not raised his voice. He did not need to. His charcoal coat was folded over one arm. His watch caught the cabin light when he shifted his wrist, and his expression carried the calm certainty of someone who had spent a lifetime assuming the world would make room for him. "Excuse me," Nia asked. Her voice was even. It had the measured steadiness she used in courtrooms when someone tried to turn a question into a trap. The man glanced at her ticket, then at the empty seat beside hers. "I requested privacy," he said. "I'm sure there's another seat available." For 1 second, no one moved. A flight attendant near the galley pretended to straighten a stack of safety cards. A man across the aisle lowered his newspaper, but kept his eyes on the page. Somewhere behind Nia, a child whispered a question that a parent quickly hushed. Then Allison Grant appeared from behind the curtain, separating first class from the rest of the plane. Her uniform was immaculate, navy jacket pressed flat, silver wings pinned above her name badge. She smiled the kind of smile that looked practiced from a distance and tired up close. "Ma'am," she said, "could you please gather your things?" Nia's fingers closed around the edge of her boarding pass. "Why?" Allison's smile held. "There has been a seating adjustment." Nia glanced at the seat beside her. It was empty. Then she looked toward the aisle, where the man waited without discomfort, without embarrassment, as if her removal had already been decided somewhere far above both of them. "My ticket says 2A, Nia said. "Yes, ma'am. And I boarded early because I paid for this seat." "I understand. Then what exactly is being adjusted?" The rain tapped lightly against the window. The engines deepened into a slow mechanical growl. Allison looked past Nia's shoulder, toward the man in the charcoal coat, then back again. It was a small movement. Almost nothing. But Nia noticed. She had built a career on noticing small movements. A witness avoiding a question. A judge pausing before an objection. A corporation hiding the truth behind careful language. "We're trying to make this flight comfortable for everyone," Allison said. Nia stood, not because she intended to leave, but because she wanted Allison to see her clearly. She was 34 years old, a black attorney with a federal civil rights hearing waiting for her in Chicago the next morning. She had spent 11 years learning how to speak without giving anyone the satisfaction of calling her difficult. "Comfortable for everyone," Nia repeated. "Or comfortable for him." Allison's expression tightened for half a second. The man in the charcoal coat finally looked directly at Nia. His eyes were pale, unreadable, and completely certain that she would move. Nia held his gaze. Then Allison lowered her voice. "Ma'am, if you do not cooperate, I will have to ask airport security to assist us." The cabin went still again. Nia looked down at her carry-on bag, then at the gold stripe printed along the edge of her boarding pass. She had earned that seat. She had paid for that seat. And yet, under the cold blue cabin lights, with strangers watching and no one speaking, she understood exactly what they were asking her to surrender. Nia did not sit back down. She remained standing beside 2A, one hand resting lightly on the handle of her carry-on, while the cabin seemed to hold its breath around her. The overhead bins clicked shut one by one. A soft chime sounded near the front galley, followed by the captain's voice welcoming passengers aboard Flight 618 to Chicago. His calm announcement floated through the cabin as if nothing unusual had happened, as if a woman was not being asked to disappear from a seat she had paid for. Allison shifted her weight. "Ms. Brooks, I need an answer." Nia looked at the name badge pinned above the attendant's heart. "Allison Grant." The letters were small and polished. Nia read them once, then again. "You have my answer," she said. "I am staying in my assigned seat." The man in the charcoal coat exhaled through his nose. It was not quite a laugh. "This is becoming unnecessarily complicated," he said. Nia turned toward him. Up close, he smelled faintly of expensive cologne and rain. His hair was silver at the temples, neatly cut, and the crease in his collar looked sharp enough to draw blood, though nothing in his face suggested he had ever worried about being asked to leave a place where he belonged. No, Nia said quietly. It was complicated before I got here. His mouth tightened. Allison stepped closer, lowering her voice until it became almost gentle. There is a seat available in the main cabin. We can move you there at no charge. Nia stared at her. For a moment, she thought she had heard wrong. Then the words settled in her chest, cold and heavy. At no charge, as if she had been offered a favor. As if the difference between first class and row 27 was a small inconvenience instead of a message. You are offering me the seat I already paid for, Nia said, in a different part of the plane. I am offering a solution. To whose problem? Allison did not answer. Across the aisle, the man with the newspaper folded it carefully and placed it on his lap. He was older, maybe late 60s, with tired eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He looked at Nia, then at the empty seat beside the man in charcoal. She has a valid ticket, he said. His voice was low, but clear. The man in charcoal turned his head slowly. Sir, this does not concern you. The older passenger looked down at his hands. It concerns everyone when people are treated this way. A flush climbed Allison's neck. We appreciate your concern, but our crew is handling the matter. Nia watched the older man fall silent again. Not because he agreed. Because he understood the cost of speaking too long in a room that wanted quiet more than truth. She knew that silence. She had seen it in depositions, conference rooms, school board hearings, and courthouse hallways. It was the silence of people who recognized wrong, but hoped someone else would carry the weight of naming it. Nia reached into the side pocket of her bag and took out her phone. Allison's eyes narrowed. Ma'am, recording crew members is not permitted. I am not recording, Nia said. She opened the notes application and began to type. Flight 618. Gate B29. Seat 2A. Allison Grant. Time, 6:42 p.m. Then she added the name she had seen on the man's leather travel tag resting near his shoes. Miles Caldwell. She typed it slowly, letter by letter. When she looked up, Allison was watching her with a new expression. Not anger. Not yet. Something closer to worry. Ms. Brooks, Allison said. Please come with me for a moment. Nia slipped her phone back into her bag. The rain outside had grown heavier, turning the runway lights into trembling gold lines. She glanced once at the empty seat beside Miles Caldwell. Then she lifted the handle of her carry-on. All right, she said, but I want the reason stated clearly. Allison led Nia toward the front galley, past the narrow curtain and the polished metal coffee urn that gave off a bitter, burnt smell. The cabin noise faded behind them, replaced by the soft rattle of ice in plastic cups and the distant hiss of rain against the aircraft windows. Nia kept one hand on her carry-on handle. She did not rush. She did not look back. But she could feel the eyes following her, the quiet relief of people grateful that the discomfort had been moved somewhere they no longer had to see it. Allison stopped near the service counter and folded her hands. There has been an operational reassignment, she said. Her voice was clipped now, stripped of its earlier softness. You will be accommodated in the main cabin. Nia studied her face. That is not a reason. It is the information I have been given. No, Nia said. It is language designed to avoid the reason. Allison glanced toward the curtain. Ms. Brooks, I need you to cooperate. Nia almost smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Cooperation. The word had followed her through too many rooms. It had been used by school administrators who told her mother not to make things harder, by employers who praised her calm after overlooking her for promotion, by opposing counsel who assumed a black woman with a firm voice must be angry before she had even finished a sentence. Nia had learned early that people often called it cooperation when they meant obedience. She had been 11 years old the first time she watched her mother come home from an overnight shift at the airport with swollen feet and a paper cup of cold coffee in her hand. Her mother had worked near the baggage claim counters, wearing a gray uniform that always smelled faintly of disinfectant and jet fuel. She used to say that airports showed people exactly who they were. Some travelers smiled at the workers who carried their bags. Some looked through them like glass. And some believed money gave them the right to make another human being smaller. Nia had listened from the kitchen table while finishing homework beneath a yellow lamp. Back then, she had not known she would become an attorney. She had only known that she hated the way her mother's shoulders sank when someone called her by snapping their fingers. Years later, in law school, Nia discovered that systems rarely announced their cruelty plainly. They buried it in policies, exceptions, flexible standards, and phrases that sounded harmless until someone was the one being removed. Operational reassignment, guest comfort, service recovery, words that could make discrimination sound like housekeeping. Allison cleared her throat. The flight is scheduled to depart in 14 minutes. Nia looked down at the polished floor, where the overhead lights reflected in thin white lines. Then she looked back at Allison. Please state for the record whether my ticket was invalid. Allison said nothing. Please state whether seat 2A has been assigned to another passenger. Again, nothing. Nia nodded once, slowly. Then please state why I am being asked to leave it. For the first time, Allison's composure slipped. Her eyes flicked toward the curtain, then toward the open aircraft door. Mr. Caldwell has certain travel preferences, she said at last. Nia felt something settle inside her, quiet and sharp. Not surprise. Confirmation. And his preference is that I do not sit beside him. Allison pressed her lips together. Nia reached into her bag and removed a slim leather folder. Inside was a copy of her itinerary, her first-class receipt, and the briefing notes for the civil rights hearing waiting for her in Chicago. She held the documents against her chest, not like a shield, but like a reminder. My name is Nia Brooks, she said. I am not asking for special treatment. I am asking you to explain why a valid passenger is being removed from a paid seat because another passenger finds her presence inconvenient. Allison's face changed again. This time, the worry did not disappear. Allison stared at Nia as though the name itself had altered the temperature in the galley. Beyond the curtain, a flight attendant announced that boarding was complete, her voice smooth and cheerful over the intercom. The words landed strangely in the narrow space between the coffee urn and the storage cabinets. Complete, as if everyone who mattered was already in place. Allison lowered her voice further. Mr. Caldwell is an important passenger. Nia held her folder against her chest. Important passengers still sit beside people. Allison looked toward the curtain again. He has requested discretion. Discretion from what? Nia asked. From a woman sitting in the seat she purchased? The answer did not come. It hung there with the smell of stale coffee and warm plastic. Nia watched Allison's face carefully. The woman was not cruel in the loud, obvious way. She did not sneer. She did not use a slur. That almost made it worse. Her manner was polished, professional, wrapped in the soft language of customer service. But Nia knew how easily harm could wear a pleasant expression. In court, she had seen companies deny discrimination while presenting charts, policies, and carefully edited emails. Nobody said the truth out loud. Nobody had to. The pattern said it for them. Let me understand this, Nia said. Mr. Caldwell asked not to sit next to me. You agreed. And now you are asking me to solve the discomfort he created. Allison's jaw tightened. I am asking you to help us avoid a disruption. You already have one. Nia's voice remained calm, but each word carried more weight now. You created it when you decided his preference mattered more than my ticket. A faint sound came from behind the curtain. Someone had shifted in the first-class cabin. Someone was listening. Allison reached for the intercom phone mounted near the counter, then stopped before touching it. Ms. Brooks, there are procedures. Then follow them, Nia said. Show me the procedure that allows an airline to remove a passenger from her paid seat because a white man does not want her beside him. Allison's eyes flashed. Please do not make accusations. Then give me a different explanation. For the first time, Allison had nothing polished left to say. Her shoulders rose with a shallow breath. She looked tired suddenly, not powerful. But Nia had learned that exhaustion did not erase responsibility. People could be afraid of losing their jobs and still choose to protect someone else's dignity. People could follow rules and still ask which rules were wrong. From the cabin, Miles Caldwell's voice carried through the curtain. It was quiet, controlled, and impatient. Is this settled? Allison closed her eyes for the briefest second. Then she opened them and looked at Nia. Mr. Caldwell has a confidential travel profile, she said. His accommodations are approved at a corporate level. Nia felt the phrase settle in her mind like a stone dropped into deep water. Corporate level. Not a spontaneous request. Not one flight attendant making a bad decision. Something larger. Something documented. She glanced down at the leather travel tag she had seen near his shoes. Miles Caldwell. The name sounded familiar now, though she could not yet place it. She slid her phone from her bag and opened her notes again. Please repeat that, she said. Allison's expression changed. Why? Nia typed the words from memory anyway. Confidential travel profile. Corporate level. Because, Nia said softly, you just told me this was not an accident. Allison did not answer right away. The silence between them was thin and brittle, like ice over dark water. Nia could hear the soft beep of a scanner from the jet bridge outside, the distant roll of a suitcase over concrete, the engine beneath the cabin gathering its low, patient strength. Then Allison reached for the radio clipped to her waist. I need a gate supervisor at the aircraft door, she said. Her voice was steady again, but the steadiness had changed. It was no longer professional. It was defensive. Nia watched her press the button, release it, and avoid looking directly at her. You are calling a supervisor because I asked you to explain your decision? Nia said, I am calling a supervisor because you are refusing a seat reassignment. I am refusing to surrender a seat that belongs to me. Allison folded her hands. Ms. Brooks, this flight cannot be delayed. Nia almost laughed, though the sound never reached her throat. The flight had not been delayed by her. It had been delayed by a man who had looked at a black woman in first class and decided her presence was an inconvenience that someone else should fix. But the burden had shifted, as it always did. His demand became her disruption. His discomfort became her responsibility. You keep saying the flight, Nia said. But you are not worried about the flight. You are worried about upsetting him. Allison's eyes moved toward the curtain again. On the other side, Miles Caldwell sat in 2B, waiting. Nia imagined him smoothing one cuff, checking the time, trusting that the machinery around him would do what it had always done. Make room. Move people. Silence the problem before it reached him. Nia had seen men like him in courtrooms. Men who never raised their voices because they had institutions to raise them for them. Men who believed the cleanest form of power was the kind that did not have to look cruel. The curtain shifted. Miles stepped into the galley with the careful impatience of someone who had decided he had waited long enough. He stood beneath the fluorescent light, his coat still draped over his arm, his face composed. What is taking so long? He asked. Allison straightened. Mr. Caldwell, we are resolving the seating matter. He looked at Nia, then at her carry-on bag. There is no need to turn this into something it is not, he said. Nia met his eyes. Then tell me what it is. His expression barely moved. A scheduling issue. No, Nia said. A scheduling issue is a delayed connection. A scheduling issue is a broken seat. This is a man deciding he should not have to sit beside me. The words landed quietly, but they changed the air. Allison's hand tightened around her radio. Miles looked at Nia for a long moment, and something cold passed through his face. Not shame. Not yet. Annoyance that she had said the private part out loud. You are making assumptions, he said. Nia nodded slowly. I am reading the facts. She lifted her boarding pass between them. I paid for 2A. I boarded with 2A. The seat is empty. Your employee told me your preference is approved at a corporate level. So tell me, Mr. Caldwell, what exactly am I supposed to assume? He did not answer. A gate supervisor appeared at the aircraft door, a white woman in a dark blazer with an airport badge swinging against her chest. She took in the scene quickly. Nia standing by the galley, Allison rigid beside the counter, Miles near the curtain, the first-class cabin listening without looking. Is there a problem? She asked. Nia turned toward her. Her fingers rested on the handle of her carry-on, calm and certain. Yes, she said. There is. And I would like every person involved to say it clearly. The gate supervisor introduced herself as Dana Whitmore, but Nia barely had time to register the name before Allison began explaining. Ms. Brooks was offered another seat, Allison said. She is refusing to comply with a necessary reassignment. Dana listened with her hands clasped in front of her, her expression smooth and unreadable. Then she looked at Nia. Is that correct? Nia lifted her boarding pass. I was offered a seat in the main cabin after Mr. Caldwell said he did not want me sitting beside him. Dana's eyes moved toward Miles. He stood perfectly still beneath the galley lights, one hand resting against the top of a seat back, as if he had wandered into an inconvenience that belonged to someone else. Mr. Caldwell, Dana said, is there an issue with your assigned seat? No, he replied. Then why is Ms. Brooks being moved? For the first time, the answer did not come easily. Allison glanced at him. Miles glanced at Allison. In that small exchange, Nia saw the entire shape of the problem. Nobody wanted to say it. Everybody wanted the result. I have certain travel requirements, Miles said at last. Dana nodded once. Medical requirements. Personal requirements. Are those requirements documented in the reservation? Miles's jaw tightened. They are handled through corporate channels. Dana looked at Allison. Show me the note. Allison hesitated. The hesitation lasted less than a second, but it was enough. She reached for the tablet mounted near the service counter and entered a code. The screen brightened between them, casting pale light across her face. Nia stood quietly, watching Allison scroll through the reservation file. There were seat numbers, meal preferences, a request for bottled spring water, a note about avoiding red-eye connections. Then Allison stopped. Her fingertip hovered above one line. Dana leaned closer. Read it. Allison swallowed. It says, Executive traveler requests discretion when seated beside unfamiliar passengers. The words sat in the galley like smoke. Nia felt her chest rise slowly beneath her blazer. Unfamiliar passengers, she said. Is that how you describe me? Allison looked down. Dana's face changed, not dramatically, but enough. The practiced neutrality gave way to something more alert. Was that note used to remove Ms. Brooks from her purchased seat? Dana asked. Allison did not answer. Was it? Dana repeated. The seat adjustment was made to accommodate an executive travel request, Allison said. Nia looked directly at Dana. And where, exactly, does my consent appear in that request? No one spoke. A nearby flight attendant stepped out from behind the curtain. She was a black woman in her 50s with silver at her temples and a calm, tired strength in her eyes. Her name tag read Tasha Reed. She had likely been there longer than any of them realized. It does not, Tasha said quietly. Allison turned sharply. Tasha, this does not concern you. It concerns me when I see a passenger treated unfairly, Tasha replied. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. Ms. Brooks boarded with a valid first-class ticket. The seat was open. Nobody had a safety concern. Nobody had a medical concern. This was not operational. Miles looked at Tasha with a hard, measured stare. You should be careful about making claims you cannot prove. Tasha met his eyes. I am careful every day, she said. That is why I remember what I see. The cabin had gone quiet again. Even through the curtain, Nia could feel it. The people in first class were no longer pretending not to hear. Dana looked from Tasha to Allison, then to the tablet screen still glowing on the counter. Finally, she turned to Nia. Ms. Brooks, she said, I need you to step off the aircraft while we review this matter. Nia tightened her grip on the handle of her carry-on. For one brief moment, hurt flashed through her like cold water. They had heard enough to question the decision. They had heard enough to know she had been wronged. And still, the person being removed was her. Nia looked toward seat 2A, visible through the opening in the curtain. It remained empty. I will step off, she said. But I want it documented that I am not leaving voluntarily. Dana nodded slowly. Nia pulled her bag behind her and walked toward the aircraft door. As she passed Miles Caldwell, she did not look away. You asked for discretion, she said softly. What you wanted was silence. Nia stepped out onto the jet bridge, and the aircraft door closed behind her with a soft hydraulic sigh that sounded far too final for something so unfinished. The air in the corridor was colder than the cabin, carrying the metallic scent of rain, wet concrete, and recycled ventilation. Her carry-on wheels clicked over the ridged floor as she moved a few steps away from the door, then stopped beside the narrow window overlooking the runway. Flight 618 sat under the storm clouds like a sealed silver tube, its wing lights blinking through the rain. Through the small oval windows along the first-class cabin, Nia could see only shapes and reflections. A row of pale heads, dark suits, the warm glow of reading lamps. Then, for a brief second, the angle changed as a ground vehicle rolled past, and she saw it clearly. Seat 2A was still empty. No new passenger had taken it. No emergency traveler had been moved into it. No operational need had ever existed. The space beside Miles Caldwell remained open, clean, and untouched, exactly where she had been sitting minutes before. Nia felt no surprise. Surprise belonged to people who still expected institutions to correct themselves the moment the truth appeared. She had spent too long reading case files to believe that. Still, something in her chest tightened as she stared through the rain-streaked glass. They had not needed her seat. They had needed the picture of the cabin to look a certain way. The thought was quiet, but it landed with the weight of a locked door. Behind her, The aircraft door opened again. Nia turned, expecting Dana Whitmore or another manager with another careful phrase. Instead, Tasha Reed stepped into the jet bridge with a folded white napkin in one hand. Her navy uniform looked almost black beneath the harsh overhead lights, and a few loose strands of silver hair had escaped near her temples. She closed the door behind her without making a sound. "They told me not to come out here," Tasha said. Nia looked at the napkin. "Then why did you?" Tasha gave a small, tired smile. "Because I have been told not to do the right thing before." For a moment, neither woman spoke. Rain slipped down the window beside them in thin, uneven lines. Somewhere beyond the jet bridge, an airport cart beeped as it backed away from the gate. Tasha held out the napkin. "I wrote down the time Allison changed the seating status," she said. 6:41 in the evening. Then she marked the seat as restricted. Nia accepted it carefully. The ink had bled slightly through the paper, but the numbers were clear. Underneath them, Tasha had written 2 more words: executive request. Nia looked up. "You saw that?" "I was standing beside the service panel when she entered it." Tasha's voice lowered. "I have worked for this airline 22 years. I know the difference between a genuine operational change and someone trying to make a problem disappear." Nia folded the napkin once and slipped it into her leather folder. "Why has nobody stopped it?" Tasha looked through the window at the aircraft. Her expression softened, but not with peace. "Because sometimes people are scared. Sometimes they need the health insurance. Sometimes they have seen what happens to workers who become difficult." She paused. "And sometimes they tell themselves that one bad moment is not worth risking everything." Nia nodded slowly. She understood that logic. She hated it, but she understood it. Her mother had used it once after a supervisor called her by the wrong name for 6 months and laughed when she corrected him. "I need this job more than I need to win that argument," her mother had said. Nia had been 14, angry enough to shake. Her mother had touched her cheek and added, "Just promise me you will know the difference when it is your turn." Tasha watched Nia's face. "You know who he is, do you not?" Nia looked back at the empty first-class seat visible through the rain. Miles Caldwell's name had been circling in her mind since the galley. Then it clicked into place. The television interviews. The newspaper photograph. The announcement about a new chief executive brought in to rebuild the airline's public image. Nia opened her phone and typed his name into the search bar. A photograph appeared almost instantly. Miles Caldwell stood at a podium beneath the company logo, smiling for cameras, one hand raised as if he were making a promise. The headline beneath the image read, "Skyward Airlines names Miles Caldwell Chief Executive Officer." Nia stared at the screen until the letters stopped moving. Then she looked through the glass again, toward the man sitting beside the empty seat. Tasha's voice came softly beside her. "That is why Allison was afraid." Nia closed her phone. Her breathing stayed calm, but the air around her seemed to change. This was not just one passenger abusing a privilege. This was the person at the top of the airline using his power to decide who belonged beside him. Nia tightened her hold on the folder beneath her arm. "No," she said quietly. "That is why they should all be afraid." The jet bridge felt smaller after the truth had a name. Nia stood beside the narrow window with her phone dark in her hand, while rain swept across the runway in long silver sheets. On the other side of the glass, the aircraft waited with its door closed, its first-class cabin glowing softly against the evening storm. Somewhere behind those oval windows, Miles Caldwell sat beside an empty seat that had been hers. Tasha watched Nia carefully. "Dana is probably trying to figure out how to get you on the next flight without making this worse," she said. Nia looked at the white napkin tucked inside her folder. 6:41. Executive request. 2 short lines of ink. Enough to show a decision had been made. Not enough to show why. "They will call it a misunderstanding," Nia said. "Or a service failure." Tasha nodded once. "They always find a clean name for a dirty thing." Before Nia could answer, the aircraft door opened again. Dana Whitmore stepped onto the jet bridge with a tablet held close to her chest. Her dark blazer was buttoned neatly, but a strand of hair had loosened near her temple. She looked past Nia toward the rain, then back at her. "Ms. Brooks, I need to speak with you in the terminal." Nia did not move. "Will Flight 618 leave without me?" Dana hesitated. "The captain is waiting for final clearance." "That is not what I asked." Dana's eyes lowered for a moment. "Yes," she said. "It is scheduled to depart shortly." Nia looked through the window. The plane had not moved. The seat had not changed, but the people inside had decided they could continue without answering for what they had done. She felt the old instinct rise in her, the one that told her to stay composed, gather facts, and never let anger speak before evidence had a chance to breathe. Then I need the name of the person who authorized my removal, Nia said. Dana held the tablet tighter. This is still under review. You already know the answer. Dana said nothing. Nia stepped closer, not aggressively, but enough that Dana had to meet her eyes. Mr. Caldwell is the chief executive officer of this airline. His profile triggered the request. Allison changed my seat status because of that request. Is any part of that inaccurate? For a second, the only sound was the rain striking the glass. Then Dana looked at Tasha. Tasha did not look away. Dana turned back to Nia. Mr. Caldwell's travel arrangements are managed by executive services, she said carefully. That does not give anyone permission to discriminate. But it gave them permission to remove me, Nia replied. Dana's face tightened. I did not authorize the initial action. No, Nia said. You just came here to make sure it stayed quiet. The words did not land like a shout. They landed like a file placed on a desk. Dana took a breath. I can rebook you on the 8:15 flight. First class. We can also provide a travel credit for the inconvenience. Nia almost smiled at the phrase. Inconvenience. It made the whole thing sound like a spilled drink or a late bag. I have a hearing in Chicago at 9 tomorrow morning, she said. I can take another flight. But I will not take a credit in exchange for pretending this was a scheduling issue. Dana's fingers tapped once against the tablet case. What are you asking for? Nia looked down at her phone, then opened the notes application again. Her voice stayed low. The full passenger manifest for this flight. The original seat map. Every change made after I boarded. The executive travel note that was used against me. And the names of everyone who approved it. Dana stared at her. You cannot demand that at the gate. Nia slid her phone back into her bag. I am not demanding it at the gate, she said. I am preserving the record. Behind them, the aircraft doors sealed shut for the last time. A moment later, the engines grew louder. Flight 618 began to move away from the gate, carrying Miles Caldwell toward Chicago while the empty seat beside him stayed visible until the rain swallowed it. The runway lights disappeared behind the rain, and with them went the last easy version of the evening. Nia stood at gate B29 until the aircraft became a small moving shape beyond the glass, then a pair of red lights swallowed by the storm. Dana had already turned toward the terminal, speaking quietly into her radio. Allison remained inside the closed aircraft. Miles Caldwell was in the air, and Nia was still standing on the ground with a leather folder, a first-class ticket she had not been allowed to use, and a choice that felt heavier than the carry-on at her side. Tasha walked beside her as they entered the terminal. The crowd moved around them in soft waves of rolling luggage and tired voices. A little boy dragged a blue backpack shaped like a dinosaur. A woman in a tan coat balanced a paper cup of coffee and checked the departure board. Nobody looked twice at Nia. Nobody knew that, 10 minutes earlier, an airline had decided she could be moved because a powerful man did not want to share the air beside her. Near an empty row of charging stations, Tasha stopped. You should record what happened while it is still fresh, she said. Nia nodded. She sat down, placed her folder on her lap, and opened the notes application on her phone. The cursor blinked against the white screen. For a moment, she could not type. Not because she did not know the facts. She knew every word. The blue cabin lights. Allison's name badge. Dana's careful voice. The empty seat beside Miles Caldwell. But facts did not always capture what it felt like to be treated as a problem simply for taking up the space you had earned. Tasha sat beside her, hands folded over a small service tote. Start with the time, she said gently. Nia typed. 6:41 in the evening. Gate B29. Flight 618. Seat 2A. She wrote Allison Grant's name, then Dana Whitmore's. She wrote the exact phrase from the tablet. Executive traveler requests discretion when seated beside unfamiliar passengers. Her thumb paused above the screen. Then she added the line that mattered most. Passenger removed despite valid paid first-class ticket. No safety issue. No medical issue. No operational need. Tasha watched her without interrupting. Are you going to post it? She asked. Nia looked up. A television above the gate showed a silent news segment about weather delays. On the screen, travelers hurried through another airport under a headline about summer storms. Nia imagined the video from the cabin, if one existed. She imagined strangers cutting it into short clips, arguing in comments, choosing sides before they understood the whole story. She knew what public outrage could do. It could force attention. It could also turn a person's pain into entertainment before the truth had a chance to become evidence. Not yet, Nia said. Tasha nodded as if she had expected that answer. Good. Nia reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. The edges were worn from years of being carried through courthouse security lines and long days of depositions. It read Brooks Civil Rights Law Group. Beneath her name was a number she had memorized long ago. She pressed it, held the phone to her ear, and listened to the first ring. Her colleague, Daniel Mercer, answered on the third. Nia, are you already in Chicago? Nia looked through the terminal window at the rain sliding down the glass. Her voice was quiet, but it no longer carried uncertainty. No, she said, but I need you to send a preservation notice to Skyward Airlines tonight. Daniel was silent for a beat. What happened? Nia closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. They thought they could move me, she said. Now we are going to find out how many other people they moved before me. Daniel did not ask Nia to explain twice. By the time she reached the quieter end of the terminal, he had already opened a secure case file and started drafting the preservation notice. The airport lights reflected off the tile floor in long white streaks, and the rain beyond the windows made the dark runways look like sheets of glass. Nia sat with her carry-on between her shoes while Tasha stood near the gate entrance, watching the departures board change one line at a time. I need everything preserved, Nia said into the phone. Security footage from Gate B29, the passenger seating logs, employee messages, the executive travel profile, and every modification made to Flight 618 after boarding began. Daniel's keyboard clicked softly through the call. I will have it sent within 10 minutes. Send it to legal, compliance, customer relations, and the chief operating office. Daniel paused. You think this goes that high? Nia looked through the glass at the wet tarmac. The aircraft that had carried Miles Caldwell away was gone now, but the empty space at the gate seemed to remain. It already did, she said. That is the problem. 20 minutes later, Nia received a message from Skyward Airlines. It came from a generic customer care address, filled with polished language about inconvenience, travel credits, and their commitment to respectful service. She read it once, then handed the phone to Tasha. Tasha's mouth tightened as she scanned the screen. They wrote this before anyone even asked what happened, she said. Nia took the phone back. They did not write it for what happened. They wrote it for what they hope nobody can prove. Her alternate flight began boarding at 8:15. This time, the gate agent checked Nia's ticket twice before looking up with a careful smile. First class, Ms. Brooks. Seat 3C. Nia thanked her and walked down the jet bridge alone. She noticed every detail now. The worn blue carpet, the cold air leaking through the seams of the corridor, the way passengers ahead of her moved without wondering whether their seats would still belong to them when they reached the plane. She took 3C, placed her folder beneath the seat in front of her, and watched the cabin fill. No one spoke to her. No one asked her to move. Yet the calm felt fragile, like a room after an argument when everyone pretends nothing has changed. As the plane lifted through the clouds, Daniel called again. His voice had lost its usual easy warmth. Nia, I found something. She pressed the phone closer to her ear. What? There are public complaints against Skyward from the last 3 years. Not many made headlines. Most were closed as service disputes. But several used the same language. Nia looked down at the napkin Tasha had given her. Executive request. What language? Daniel exhaled slowly. Seat moved for comfort. Passenger reassigned after boarding. No operational explanation. In each case, the passenger was black. The seatbelt sign glowed above the aisle. Around her, people adjusted blankets, opened tablets, and ordered sparkling water from the flight attendant. Nia sat still. How many? She asked. Daniel was quiet for a moment. I found 11 in public records, he said. But that is only what people formally reported. Nia stared at the dark window beside her. Her reflection looked back at her, calm and tired, framed by the small gold light above her seat. 11 people. 11 different flights. 11 moments someone had been told, in one polite phrase or another, that their paid seat could become negotiable when the wrong person found them inconvenient. That is not a mistake, Nia said. Daniel's voice softened. No. Nia closed the folder on her lap and rested her palm over it. Outside, the clouds opened beneath the wing, revealing a field of city lights far below. "It is a system," she said. And somewhere ahead of her, in another cabin on another flight, Miles Caldwell was still traveling as if no one had noticed what his comfort had cost. By 7:30 the next morning, Chicago was washed clean by rain. Nia stood outside the federal building with a paper cup of coffee cooling between her hands, watching taxis slide through puddles along Dearborn Street. She had slept less than 3 hours. Her suitcase still carried the faint airport smell of damp fabric and recycled air, and the folder beneath her arm felt thicker than it had the night before. Inside, lawyers in dark coats moved through security lines, checking watches and speaking in low voices about hearings, motions, deadlines. Nia had spent years entering buildings like this to defend people who had been asked to accept less than they deserved. But that morning, every polished stone floor and brass elevator button reminded her of seat 2A. Daniel arrived with 2 coffees and an expression that told her he had not slept much either. "I found the policy," he said. Nia looked at him. "The executive travel profile?" "More than that." He handed her a printed document, 32 pages long, with Skyward Airlines printed across the top in dark blue letters. The title read Premium Guest Continuity Standards. It sounded harmless. It sounded like the kind of policy nobody outside a corporate office would ever bother to read. Nia flipped through the pages slowly as they entered the elevator. There were sections about airport transfers, private boarding options, preferred meals, hotel arrangements during delays. Then Daniel tapped a paragraph on page 17. There. Nia read it once. Then again. The language was careful. Executive travelers could request environmental continuity when unfamiliar passenger proximity created discomfort inconsistent with premium service expectations. Crew members were instructed to use discreet reseating measures when possible. No race was mentioned. No race ever needed to be mentioned when the result was predictable enough. Nia felt the elevator rise beneath her feet. "This is the language Allison used," she said. "Discretion, comfort, reassignment." Daniel nodded. "There is more." He turned to the final page. At the bottom, above the date and a line of corporate approval stamps, was one signature. Miles Caldwell, not as chief executive officer. The document was 4 years old, signed when he had been chief operating officer. Nia stared at his name until the letters seemed to sharpen. The man on Flight 618 had not merely used a policy created by someone else. He had built the door that had been used to push her through. Daniel's voice was quiet. "A former compliance analyst sent this to a reporter last year. The reporter never ran it because there was no incident tied directly to it." Nia looked up. "There is now." They stepped into the hallway outside courtroom 12. Sunlight pushed weakly through the high windows, turning the rainwater on the glass into pale gold lines. Nia thought of her mother's hands around that cold paper cup after a night shift at the airport. She thought of Tasha standing in the jet bridge, saying that people were scared. She thought of the 11 public complaints Daniel had found, each one closed with a travel credit, an apology, or a sentence that made a wound sound like a scheduling issue. "He did not make a mistake," Nia said. Daniel waited. Nia folded the policy carefully and placed it inside her folder beside the napkin Tasha had given her. He created a system that let people call exclusion a service. Her phone buzzed in her hand. An email had arrived from Skyward Airlines legal department. They confirmed receipt of the preservation notice. They denied wrongdoing. They offered to discuss a private resolution. Nia read the final line twice. "We are committed to resolving this matter discreetly." A small breath left her chest. Then she looked at Daniel. "They still think discretion is their shield," she said. Outside the courtroom doors, a clerk called for counsel to enter. Nia straightened the collar of her blazer, lifted her folder, and walked forward. Somewhere in a glass office high above an airport runway, Miles Caldwell was probably being told that the problem could be managed. He did not yet understand that Nia Brooks had never confused being quiet with being powerless. 6 days later, Nia entered Skyward Airlines headquarters through a lobby built to make people feel small. The walls were glass, the floors were pale stone, and a suspended metal sculpture of a rising wing turned slowly beneath the skylight. Outside, the city moved under a clear gray morning. Inside, everything was quiet enough to hear the soft click of Nia's shoes as she crossed the lobby with Daniel at her side and her leather folder held beneath one arm. A receptionist led them to the 34th floor, where a conference room waited behind frosted doors. Miles Caldwell stood near the windows when Nia entered. He was not wearing the charcoal coat from the flight. Today he wore a dark navy suit, no tie, and an expression that looked carefully assembled. Allison Grant sat at one end of the table beside two attorneys from the company. Dana Whitmore was there as well, hands folded tightly in her lap. Tasha Reed had been invited as a witness, though nobody had said that word aloud. Nia noticed the empty chair at the center of the long table before anyone spoke. It was placed directly across from Miles. She walked to it, set down her folder, and sat. For a moment, the room held only the quiet hum of the building ventilation and the distant sound of traffic far below. Miles spoke first. "Ms. Brooks, I want to apologize for what happened on Flight 618. Nia looked at him. "Do you mean when you asked that I be moved from my paid seat, or when your employees carried out your request?" One of the company attorneys shifted in his chair. Miles lowered his eyes briefly. "Both. And do you understand why it happened?" Miles looked toward the window. A policy was applied in a way it should not have been. Nia opened her folder and placed the Premium Guest Continuity Standards document on the table. Then she placed the napkin from Tasha beside it. 6:41 in the evening. Executive request. The small pieces of paper looked almost ordinary against the polished wood. "A policy does not apply itself," Nia said. "People write it. People approve it. People use it when they believe someone else's dignity can be treated as a variable." Miles nodded slowly. "You are right." The room went still. Nia had heard apologies before. Some were sincere. Some were strategic. The difference was never in the words. It was always in what came after them. Miles pushed a folder across the table. "Skyward is prepared to offer a confidential settlement," he said. "It includes compensation, a public statement of regret, and a personal commitment from me to review our executive travel practices." Nia did not touch the folder. "Confidential," she repeated. Miles looked at her. "I thought it would give you privacy." "No," Nia said. "It gives you privacy." Daniel remained quiet beside her, but she felt him shift slightly. Across the room, Tasha looked down at her hands. Allison's face had gone pale. Nia leaned forward, her voice calm enough that everyone had to listen closely. "I do not want to check for one seat. I want every complaint filed under guest comfort, service recovery, or operational reassignment reviewed by an independent civil rights auditor. I want passengers told why they are being moved before they are moved. I want employees protected when they report discriminatory treatment. I want this policy removed, and I want the data released." Miles stared at her. "That would expose the company to serious consequences." Nia held his gaze. It already exposed passengers to serious consequences. The silence after that was different. It was no longer the silence of people hoping the problem would disappear. It was the silence of people beginning to understand that it would not. Miles looked down at the unsigned settlement folder, then back at Nia. For the first time since Flight 618, his face lost its certainty. "What you are asking for will be difficult," he said. Nia closed her folder and stood. "Respect is not an upgrade you give people," she said. "It is the floor beneath every rule." 6 months later, the board at Gate B29 looked different. The same airport lights shone across the polished floor. The same scent of coffee, rain, and warm cinnamon rolls drifted through the terminal. Travelers still hurried beneath rolling suitcases and departure screens, still checked their phones, still worried about delays and missed connections. But beside the boarding desk, framed in plain black metal, a new notice stood where an advertisement for premium upgrades had once been. Every paid seat belongs to the passenger assigned to it. No passenger may be moved for another traveler's personal comfort. Nia stopped long enough to read the words, though she had seen them before. She had read the final policy 3 times when it was released. She had watched Skyward Airlines publish the independent audit, the complaint data, the new reporting process, and the names of the outside civil rights advisors who would monitor the company for the next 5 years. Miles Caldwell had stepped down 2 weeks after the board released its findings. His public statement had been brief. He admitted that the policy he approved had caused harm. He admitted that leadership had confused privilege with service. He did not ask to be forgiven. Nia respected that more than she expected to. Some things could not be repaired by finding the right words. They could only be repaired by accepting the cost of changing what those words had protected. Tasha Reed was still flying. She had been promoted to cabin service trainer, and every new crew member heard her say the same thing during orientation. A passenger is never a disruption for occupying the seat they paid for. Allison Grant had chosen to remain with the airline as well. She completed the new accountability program and spoke once, quietly, during a staff training session about the night she had hidden behind procedure instead of questioning it. Nia had not attended. She did not need to. Change was not a performance for the people who had been hurt. It was work that had to continue after the room emptied. Daniel stood beside Nia at the gate with 2 folders under his arm and a coffee he had forgotten to drink. "You are thinking too hard again," he said. Nia smiled. Occupational habit. The gate agent called first-class boarding, and passengers formed a loose line beneath the blue light of the display. Nia adjusted the strap of her bag and stepped forward. Her ticket read 2A. This time, no one looked at it twice. This time, the agent smiled and said, "Have a good flight, Ms. Brooks." The jet bridge was cool and quiet. Rain tapped softly against the narrow windows, just as it had 6 months earlier, but the sound no longer felt like a warning. Inside the cabin, the seat waited beside the window. Nia placed her folder under the seat in front of her and sat down. A few minutes later, a young black girl entered with her mother, holding a small backpack shaped like a yellow star. The girl looked at the wide leather seats, then up at her mother. "Do we really get to sit here?" she whispered. Her mother checked the boarding passes and smiled. "Yes, baby, we do." Nia looked out at the wet runway, where the lights stretched into gold lines across the dark. She did not say anything. She did not need to. The girl took her seat. The cabin door closed, and for the first time, the silence felt like peace.